Good morning. Welcome to the webinar focusing on sports psychology. I'm Vlad Spencer. I'm talking to you from near Washington, D.C. Our co-moderator is Anna Tadevosyan, who is in Yerevan in Armenia. This webinar is, some of you know already, part of the International Sports Programming Initiative of the State Department Sports Diplomacy Division, and is produced by World Learning in collaboration with Digital Communication Network Southeast Europe Hub. The importance of sports psychology has been realized for some times, but still many coaches, many athletes pay too little attention to how it can help them perform better. Obviously, physical development is important, but increasingly people pay attention to training minds as well, working on issues like leadership, for example, or behavioral patterns or individual personalities. And it all starts with building a solid team culture, including goals, values, attitudes, beliefs. While professional organizations increasingly use specialized help, sports psychologists, there are still coaches and administrators of youth and development teams today, and probably many of them are in the audience with us today, who want to learn more about techniques that can help their own work, want to hear advice from experts in sports psychology. What I can share with you is that in our exchanges, that's what we do, pre and post COVID, in-person sports exchanges all over the world. Almost all groups request special meeting with sports psychologists. And that's the reason today we have invited not one, but 5 experts joining us from 3 different continents. And I'd like to thank them very much for being with us. By now, all of us know a lot about Zoom. We count obviously on your questions in the chat room. And keep in mind that our goal is not only the current conversation, that one is obviously very important, but mostly creating a powerful network. So please introduce yourselves, post links. The speakers are going to do the same thing. And then, say anything that might contribute to the team. It might connect you with somebody that you are interested in. When you don't speak, please mute your mics to maximize the sound quality for the speaker. And that being said, again, welcome to the webinar. Thanks a lot to the speakers. Anna, you have the floor for the introductory segment.
Thank you, Vlad. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to have this webinar because it's very important. For example, like countries in Armenia, in any sports, any athlete, nobody's using psychologists. And I think that this is the main team member for any sport. So we will find out from our experts how it is and why it is important. And I will go with our first speaker, Lindsay Bloom, professor of sports and exercise psychology, Bell State University from US. Lindsay, welcome. And please tell us a little bit about your experience working as a sports psychologist.
Yes, thank you so much. Let me share my screen real fast to get us going. Can you all see that?
Yes, perfect.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate this opportunity to join you. I've been on the past few webinars and been great discussion. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to talk a little bit about our work overseas, specifically in how we've used sports psychology to help coaches develop a positive culture on their youth teams and developmental teams. We've had the fortunate opportunity to work with some of the State Department exchanges, as well as some other grant opportunities all over the world. We've worked in Liberia, which is this upper picture. We've worked in Jordan. We've worked in Tajikistan, in India, in Haiti, and Nigeria. So we've had a chance to really kind of put some of these principles in place in multiple countries, as well as some work within the US. So I'll share a little bit about our experiences there. One of the keys that we've really realized across the time is that coaching education, which happens in all countries, formally and informally, really needs to include psychology and youth developmental principles. So besides the technical and tactical components of sport coaching, we really need to make sure that we have the psychological and youth development principles involved in them. So some of the ones, when we do coaching education, some of the things that we've really focused on, and we've also had the opportunity to do some research, some data collection on some of our programs too. So I'll kind of combine what we've learned across the way. So really, one of the things we found to be most helpful is really this focus on developing a positive culture. And this happens, from the youth level to the developmental to the elite level. It's really universal as far as the importance of it. And I've highlighted on here 3 kind of key areas that we have found. Again, regardless of what country we've been in, what group of youth we've worked with, what kind of coaches we've worked with. And the first one is relationships. Relationships are crucial. And while that's simple and that may be understood, I think depending on what the cultural experience has been and the typical philosophical coaching approach, the relationships may be varied and valued at different levels. And I'm here to say that it is crucial. It is the most crucial thing to developing a positive culture, and ultimately then equals the wins and the athlete development that we're all hoping for. When we see people as truly human, we respect them differently. And with this respect, there's more grace, it builds trust, motivation, and ultimately then the growth that we're looking for. For example, when we worked in Liberia, we had some coaches who had been working with youth for about a year. And when the Ebola crisis hit a few years ago, they were actually able, because of those relationships, to get the best health information to their youth. There was a lot of misunderstanding about what the information should be and a lot of distrust, but those coaches were able to get to their youth because of those relationships. And actually not one youth in their programs became sick. So really able to use those relationships to develop. We've had coaches in Tajikistan say that because of the relationships they've built with their girls, that their parents would allow them to travel in places that they would have never allowed them to travel before. And then we had another coach in Jordan, who is also a teacher, say that they were getting ready to expel one of his players. And they allowed him to come work with him in his office and with his youth teams. And he thinks he probably saved his life from time in jail. So really those relationships are key to really getting to help youth. But part of that building relationships is also this positive approach. And when we've gone to different countries that often, and even in the United States, use an autocratic approach, coaches aren't so sure what they think about this positive approach. And this is really, again, where it's about building relationships. It's about allowing the athletes to have a choice in the work that they're doing, and really contributing to what's happening. We've had a coach who's learned this approach, who was very skeptical at the beginning of our coach education program, to come back and say that he no longer physically would hit his kids anymore, he wouldn't punish them that way. And he was surprised at the new respect that they have among them. And then they were winning more and performing well. We've also had coaches who will use some of these techniques outside of sport as well. We've had a coach in Jordan talk about how he uses it to help with traffic jams within his community. So really kind of using this approach that involves collaboration and respect among coaches and athletes. And then the next thing I say, the last thing as we wrap up here, is the contribution. That we know that people are more motivated, youth are more motivated, adults are more motivated when we are able to contribute, when we are connected, as we talked about with relationships, if we believe we have a contribution to make, whatever it may be. So even youth who may not be very strong players, if they have a contribution to make, they will be more likely to contribute. So there's a saying that your team is only as strong as your weakest player. And so helping them really have a contribution, and a clear contribution, can really contribute to this positive culture. So as we wrap up here, we've learned that relationships matter, especially with vulnerable youth who might not have access to other positive adults. That the positive coaching approach really does help coaches build trust, which also then helps relationships, motivation, and perform better, which is our ultimate goal. Sport opportunities help youth have valuable lessons and ways to contribute to society. Working together helps us understand and appreciate people from different cultures. And just in general, when people are part of a team, they increase their social responsibility and they can decrease their trouble or their attitudes towards violence. So really kind of pulling together these 3 components about relationships, positive approach, and contribution. Thank you very much. I think you're still on mute, Anna.
Okay, work. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Thank you very much, Lindsay. Our next speaker is David Charlton, owner and sports psychologist, inspiring sporting excellence from Great Britain. Welcome, David. And please tell us a little bit about your experience.
Hi, Anna. Hi, everyone. I'll just share the slides there. So I'm a sports psychologist who's an applied sports psychologist. I've got a do a little bit of lecturing, but in the main, it's working on the ground with individuals and with teams. So I've worked across football or soccer in the States, it's called, rugby, cricket, netball, a complete range of sports. And my big interest is mental toughness and how you build mental toughness. So if this works, yeah, here we are. So yeah, mental toughness, when we look at certainly Professor Peter Clough's work and all the research is done, it accounts for up to 25% variation in performance, which, well, 5% or 10% would be an awful lot, but 25 is huge. And as you can see, it is a huge factor in the success of a team, in how a team or an individual responds to setbacks, to how they see opportunities. Sport's very dynamic; it changes all of the time. So again, mental toughness is a huge factor in this case. Well, one thing that really sort of sparked my interest in some ways into this was, often in a team sport, a team might play amazingly well in the first half and then just not turn up in the second half. And it's very easy for people to turn around and say that's all about their commitment, their motivation levels. But actually, there's a whole lot more to it. And where mental toughness comes into it, you've got a variation of different elements that make up mental toughness. So, for example, you've got confidence in someone's ability. You've got their emotional control. They might not be able to handle stress and pressure. They might not learn from things. They might just keep on continually making the same mistakes and repeating mistakes. So that like I say, that sparked my interest. And I'll not touch too much on culture in this short time, because I know Lindsay talked about it a lot. However, the messages, certainly from coaches, the rituals, the routines that they put in place, have such a huge impact on individuals. If we consider emotional control, for argument's sake, if a team's having a poor run of form and you've got a coach who isn't self-aware and loses their temper and on a regular basis and can't contain themselves, they might chop and change the team on a regular basis. It's going to be an unhelpful culture potentially. The second point about the autocratic side of things, Lindsay talked about, so I'll skip that element. But the bottom point in these slides there about the more senior the person in the organization, the greater level of mental toughness. And that is true. It's been found in a lot of research. However, is that a good thing? It is questionable. Just because you are mentally tough doesn't mean that you will go on to perform better and you will work collectively well as a team. One of the key things that us as sports psychologists do are to develop self-awareness. So if you're mentally tough and self-aware, then you've got a much bigger chance. So for argument's sake, the person who is very, very confident in the team might actually intimidate another teammate by the way they talk, by the way they interact with people. So it's important to have conversations and discussions, workshops around this type of thing. The person who controls their emotions very well is poker faced. It's a great skill to intimidate your rivals, to perform under pressure. However, if they're not aware of the impact that can also have on their teammates, because people can be quite difficult to read. if they've got a poker face, then it can present a problem. So again, our role is to unpick some of these factors in that case. So yeah, I don't have time to talk about the model, but certainly for anybody who's interested in mental toughness, it is a highly researched framework in business, sports psychology, health psychology, you name the background. And yeah, I love the simplicity of the model. Before I wrap up there, these are some characteristics there of world-class teams, where us as sports psychologists try to work with individuals, with coaches, with management to try and harness these characteristics so ultimately teams can go on to perform better and more consistently on a regular basis. And yeah, those are my details there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Yeah, we have questions, and we will ask after all speakers will introduce. Our next speaker is Dubrovka Martinovic. She's a sports psychologist, performance consultant from Croatia. Hello, Dubrovka, and please, yeah, we already shared. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Super. Yes. Hello, everyone. So, hello from Croatia. I'm a sports psychologist, and I also have a sports background. I was a basketball player, and I was a basketball coach for mainly youth, boys and girls under 16 and under 14. So my experience working as a sports psychologist in team sports is so far so good, what I can say. So mainly coaches accepted me as an equal staff member, what I think it's really important for the development of the collaboration and in general improvement of both sides, also my professional improvement and improvement of the team and the players I'm working with. I collaborate with players, coaches, and also referees from different sports, but mainly I work in basketball, volleyball, and handball. So also this is, if I can say, my preference to mostly work in team ball sports, because I have also this team ball background. What I usually do when I collaborate with the teams. My job also involves observation and analysis. What does this mean? For example, I do analysis of team cooperation, teamwork during the game, some sociological and psychological aspects of the game, maybe communication with the coach-athlete communication, some tips to coaches for better communication during the game, during the timeouts, and so on. I also provide individual consultations and team consultations, training sessions off and on the court. During these training sessions, trying to build activities and workshops that are practical and useful and similar to some game situations. So sometimes this is a type of simulation training. Sometimes it's activities that are transferable to the situations at the games. What I found last years as one of the great parts of my job is education, especially life transferable skills, sport life transferable skills, especially working with youth teams, teams as under 16 and under 18, so high school players, and also sometimes also some kind of research, but this is I'm mainly practical at the gym. Okay. What is widely known, and I would like to also address on these issues, what sports psychologists can do in the team, working with the teams, is to assist coaches and other staff members to improve or optimize performance, to assist training and competition stress management, facilitate team cohesion, also to improve some communication skills, and what is also important area to help them for the better recovery after injury. As I told you about life's transferable skills, I think this is I would like to make emphasis on this because, you know, working with youth players, I found that this education and the experience they have as players, especially playing in team sports, it can be really a great lesson for them, and also great knowledge for them in their future career, and generally in their life, because, you know, experience of good communication, of problem solving techniques, searching the solutions, you know, or dealing with failures, dealing with mistakes, flexible mindset. I think these are the skills that can help them in future. And I always make emphasis whenever I address any of the topics to refer to them how this knowledge from sport and experience they have can be really beneficial for them as a person in future. What is also for me interesting working with team sports is this dynamic. You know, every day is something different, because when you work with 15 or 16 people, you know, you let's say work on some issue this week, the next week is another issue. So this dynamic for me is really interesting. And, you know, every team has a different structure, different dynamic based on their developmental stage and performance level. We are able to provide them with some, you know, suggestions, with some programs. And what is really important, this is like, it's, you know, during the season, it's really interesting because many issues come along during the season, which, you know, never happen at the beginning of the season or something like that. So I think working in teams, for me professionally, it's really great experience. And you know, collaboration with coaches in this way, it's so far it's really good. Okay, thank you for my part.
Thank you very much. It was really very interesting, because for me, working with the national teams is very important part. And we don't have any psychologists working with any national team in any level. So I will have personally lots of questions after we finish. So our next speaker is Grant Parr. He's a mental performance coach from San Francisco State University, Human Valuable Department, and he's from US. Grant, hello and welcome to our webinar.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm so honored and grateful to just share my role and share my work, and just be in the presence of great people and great experts. My role is a little bit different, not necessarily different. I'm not deemed a sports psychologist. I'm a mental performance coach, what I do is I strictly focus on the mental skills part. So I'm not in a position to diagnose any mental disorders. I don't have a license per se, but I do have a master's in sports psychology from JFK University. And I've been doing this for about 6 years. I feel like I've been doing this for my whole life. I got into this profession because of a career-ending injury in college. I was a quarterback in American football for about 13 years and had 2 hip replacements on the same hip before I was 40. So going through a lot of identity issues, dealing with injury, it catapulted me into kind of looking at my life a little bit differently and getting more interested in sports psychology. So the last 6 years, I've been working with all levels, from Olympians, professional athletes, collegiate, high school youth, individuals, and also teams. And kind of what I've been focusing on is this model it's called the play present model. And all I focus on is 3 areas: mindset, culture, and leadership. So at the youth level, especially working with teams, I really feel like it's really important for me to not only to focus on the mindset, leadership, and culture aspect, is to really focus on mindfulness and energy. I think if we truly look at all the things that we need to be successful as a performer, where does it start? And I think it starts with our energy. and getting these young athletes and the coaches to learn how to teach this work, but getting them to understand the power of breath, get the understanding of energy, how to cultivate energy, how to understand the energy that we do have, not the energy that we don't have. So in the midst of working in my work for the last 5 or 6 years, what I've actually been incorporating, which I think is a very unique approach, is what I call mindset music. And I've been creating a lot of music with my mentor, Graham Betchart. And we've been doing a lot of work, which is called dual encoding, if you want to look a little bit more into that approach. But we've been using a lot of music to teach our work with the kids, with the coaches, and it's been incredible. It's been incredible for the retainment of this work, their enthusiasm for their work, for the buy-in for this work. So, within my role, as I'm focusing on all these areas, it's not just on the team, the individual athletes, or on the coaches. I'm working with administration. I'm working with physical therapists. I'm hitting all areas that's going to encompass the program as a whole.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's very interesting approach using music as a part of the mental coaching. I think that many of people here and many of us will use that also, because you are going to teach us now how to use that and how to choose the music correctly. And our last speaker is Karambir Singh. He's from India. He's a sports psychologist at Tata Steel High Performance Center Sport Department. As we understood yesterday, it's very complex sport department and they have lots of stuff going on there. So now Karambir will tell us about his experience. Karambir, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Anna. I hope I'm audible. And first of all, I beg a pardon because I joined a little late because of the login issues. And I can see a lot of, I guess the Indians are also here as a participant today. And it was wonderful listening to all the speakers, Lindsay, David, Mr. Grandpar, and Duraska. Well, I'll start with my association as a sports psychologist with various organizations. First of all, I want to tell you that here in India, the sports psychology is very new. I was telling you yesterday that it is just an infant here, just a small kid actually. We are making efforts to raise more awareness among coaches and among sports population. But with God's grace, actually, the government also now started taking interest, and we are opening up more than 100 high performance centers all across the country. And here in Tata Steel, the sports division is very big, and the history of sports division here in Tata Steel is also very profound. We won that the sports promotion award, given to us by President of India on many occasions. And just recently, we hold a trial for archery for a National Olympic squad. Other than that, yes, the topic I have not prepared any specific slide, but just recently I gave a presentation on team sport. I would like to share my presentation with everyone. Though much of things are already covered by the speakers. Just allow me to share the screen. Just let me know if it is visible, if I'm audible.
We can see your screen, yeah.
So I have done my master's in sports psychology, and my approach is very much similar to Mr. Grandpar. I also don't dig into the clinical part of or the disorder part of the mind. I like to work on the mental skills a lot, and I also prefer talk therapy, visiting the ground. I consider the sports field is my ground. Sports field is my lab. So though there are few things in sports psychology which preferably depends on a sports psychologist and it's his approach, that what they prefer, either they like to work within the laboratory, or most of nowadays work on the ground. So I like work on the ground with the athletes, like observing them, analyzing their behavior and their body language, and then providing them on-site tips to help them to improve their performance. And I'm also doing PhD in sports sciences and in engineering psychology. So is this video, I'll skip the video. Then there's the basic part of the presentation, sports psychology. Everyone know what sports psychology is. Everyone knows what psychology is nowadays. I don't think it need furthermore. Yes, one thing which I want to highlight, that psychology is pretty much invisible factor, and most of the people actually just ignore it because it is not visible. So behavior need an analysis. Behavior, if you really want to study a behavior, you have to have a sports psychologist with the team. And the most of the coaches nowadays preferring a mental performance coaches or sports psychologists, and the mental performance coaches and sports psychologists are helping the coaches to understand their athletes much better, and ultimately it is helping the coaches to make some changes in their performance and enhance their performance also. The common mistakes which I have seen actually, and it is very prevalent actually here in India also, relatively, I was talking yesterday, relatively the sports psychology is a very new field in India. If I compare USA, UK, oh my God, USA, UK is a far ahead than India. We are still far behind, but we will definitely merge that gap soon, in coming years, in terms of sports sciences and sports performance. The common mistake is the people that they think that mind will train itself. Actually, it is not true. You have to have a specific exercise plan for your mind. Like Mr. Grandpa was saying, that mental skills are very important. So I prefer mental skills. I give a schedule to the players so that they can use those mental skills. Self-talk is there, visualization is there, goal setting is there, and various activation relaxation techniques are there. Then another common mistake which the players commit is they think that sports psychology is a quick fix. Generally, what happens in various organizations and institutions, they call a sports psychologist for one particular moment before the competition, and they expect a sports psychologist to do some miracle so that team can perform better, which is not true. I think sports psychologists do have a very regular job, and I suggest all the coaches and institution to have a sports psychologist in house. And the last one is very important. The most of the athletes also prefer technical part and physical part. They put a lot of effort in the physicality and technicality, and then they forget about mentality. And here in India, it is much worse actually, because of some time it is the IQ issue. In other countries, I think the athletes are much literate. They know, because psychology is still considered to be a very, a field of an intellectuals. So the language issue is very prevalent because the country itself very diverse. Multiple languages are there, are here. So it becomes very difficult to tell the people how important mind part is. But hopefully my journey has been great. Actually, I'm doing quite a good job. So there are a couple of factors. Few of them already explained by the speakers. The factors are environment is very important for any sport. You consider team sport or individual sport, it is very important. You have to have a very motivational climate, and then the people should be positive, and they should be able to create a positive motivational climate for training. Then the training facility, training methodology. Many countries don't have proper training arenas, proper training infrastructure. They don't have good coaches also. So the methodology may be not up to date. That could be one reason that team is not performing well, because coach is not good. His knowledge is not up to date. And just not coach, I'll say the other people as well, whosoever the stakeholder are. Then the mindset and motivation is very important. This is why we are here today. And the last important factor is the support system, the scientific support system, including the sports physio, including the sports nutritionist, sports biomechanist, sports scientist, sports psychologist. So there has to be an entire team to work as a team on team, I'll say. So it is very important to have a very good support staff. Then only you can expect a performance. Then another few factors when we talk about team and team performance. So within team, I think for me, mutual respect is very important. Interpersonal relationship, positive interpersonal relationship, the understanding of the team players is very important. And I've seen many footballer or soccer players, doing a little activities, get-togethers, coming together, talking to each other, bringing their families together to build up that relationship and understanding, just to know each other. Then the fighting spirit for the common goal. There has that fighting spirit within the team to win the match, to perform better. That is also very essential. Then last but not the least, the positive team climate. So next I will talk about this very essential. I don't know, the many of the speaker will also agree. Team is comprised of various, particular athletes, and all these athletes do have their, a particular psychological attributes, the particular way to feel the things, to perceive the things, and ultimately behave accordingly. So being a sports psychologist, it is just not all the time working on the team dynamic or a coach athlete relationship or team environment, which are a team factors, or team cohesion or leadership or communication. It is very essential for a sports psychologist to look into the psychological attributes, the personality, the other factors like confidence, like confidence, control, commitment, or achievement motivation, their ability to focus and concentrate, their ability to memorize things and learn, the procedural memory basically. And last but not the least, the mental skill also is very essential. So these are some of the things which comes under the performance profiling. So I do prefer working on the athlete and uh, profiling them for their personality and various other psychological attributes. Then these are some slides I'll definitely skip. This is the psychological skill training part. I will not dig into it. Last, I'll talk here about the talent identification and development in team sport. Just not in team sport, within entire sport, there are very few such model are available. I don't know. Generally, the talent identification is very much considered to be very confidential thing. The institutes do not release their data, what they are doing in terms of assessment of the various parameters. So my role here in Tata Steel as a sports psychologist, I'm working with the Jamshedpur Football Club also. That is elite club, and our Jamshedpur Football Club also participate in Indian Super League, which is the premier football league here. So talent identification is very important. We do have a very big population at grassroots level, and we are following this talent identification and the various models to find a talent, and then we induct them into the academy, and then we train them to develop their skills over the time period. So talent identification is one area where a sports psychologist plays a very crucial role. You can see that various factors are there on the slide. The physical predictors are there. Then the physiological predictors are there, starting with aerobic capacities and aerobic capacities. Sociological predictors are there, and the psychological predictors, including attention, anticipation, decision making, game intelligence, creative thinking, motivation, and there are a lot more other such factors. It depends upon on the sport to sport what kind of factor you are going to you will target for talent identification. So thank you so much. This was my part.
Thank you very much. That was really very interesting. And before giving floor to Vlad, I want to ask all our speakers, from what year should psychologists work with team athletes? Like if we have, let's say, the national team for U14, can already psychologists work with a team? And I want to start with Lindsay answering on that question.
Sure. So I'm a big believer in using sports psychology principles with everyone in every setting. I think it really is it's not just for elite athletes. It's not just for people who want to win gold medals or championships. It's really for everybody. I mean, in fact, I have a second grader and a 13-year-old, and I use it with them just every day and trying to get our schoolwork done to what they do in sport, even at the recreational level. Just some basic principles of goal setting and self-talk and motivation, I think, can be used at any age to help us with all of our behaviors.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It overlaps into life skills, if we're honest. In education, there's performance pressures. So yeah, children, I suppose, I've found from about 10 years old, I've got into helping teach sports psychology principles. I have been asked to work with children younger than that, though I find that's a little bit questionable as to how well that's gone down. I suppose let's go with youth sports. If we think about it now, there's long gone are the days where you were to maybe kick a ball around a street or that sort of thing. It's very much organized, and there's a lot more pressure on children, be it from coaches, scouts watching, parents. There's a lot of judgments taking place, so that's where we can help an awful lot, as well as the cross between them actually doing a lot of time practicing and having their educational work too.
Thank you. Dubrovka, how is it in Croatia? From which year you start to work with the athletes? You are unmuted. You are muted. Yeah, can you unmute?
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's
Yeah,
better.
good.
Okay. So usually most of my colleagues and me start working with athletes under 14 and older. So this is from my experience that I work mainly with athletes under 14 and older. But they don't need to have any problems. This is what both of the colleagues said. It's teaching them life skills, you know, which can be really beneficial for them, because we know many of them will not be professional athletes and will not be, you know, we'll have some other careers, and this education that they will receive also from sports psychologists, it can be beneficial for them.
Thank you. So Grant.
So I typically work with athletes. Pretty much, it's the youngest is probably 12 years old of age and then above. But I feel that my approach and my focus is, again, this is life skills. We're teaching these athletes incredible skills. And when you think about, there's the role of the athlete, there's the role of the student, there's the role of being a brother, being a son, daughter. There's all these roles. And so I think that the beautiful thing about our work is we're teaching, we all have roles. I mean, our role could be just folding laundry, right? And how present do we want to be with that role? And I love what Lindsay was saying, about incorporating this work in every, like, we have to be our work. So incorporating this in every aspect. And so that's for me, whether it's team setting, whether it's individual, it's all about getting my athletes present. Right now, we're so distracted. I think some of the research out there is that our attention, we get distracted after 6-7 seconds. And we're also living in a world that's very fear-based. So I think of getting athletes, getting coaches, getting performers to get really present, getting where their feet are, and really focusing on the things that they can't control is a good start. But I also think that having a relationship with your breath, building that awareness, so all of this work that we're giving them can actually really take place, because it doesn't take place when you're out of focus and when you're not present. So for me, that's kind of where I see the principles, living them and showing them and really having them create new behaviors.
Thank you. And Karambir?
Well, actually, I also like to work on young athlete because it is slightly easy to control them. And I have worked with Olympians also, with the Asian Game medalist also. Once they achieve, once they have that achievement in their life, or either participation in Olympics or, it becomes very difficult to control them, and just not control might not be the right word to use, but becomes slightly difficult to work with them. I have seen this, I have experienced this. Maybe it is very much common with Indian athlete. I don't have an experience working with a foreign athlete, but here in India, I like to work with young athletes. And I just want to share also, I was just in the evening only today working with our junior world champion, archery champion, the Komalika Bari, and she won that gold medal last year in 2019. So right now she's preparing for Olympics, and she's going through various trials, and that those trials are very difficult. And one thing which I really want to mention is that performance pressure is real. It is up to you. You want to work on it or you really want to skip it. All the coaches, all the athletes, it is very, very much common. And every individual, even we also as a human being, feel that performance pressure at times. So performance pressure is real and it can be worked out. We just need that a particular plan for it, and dedication, and you can overcome that, the consequences of performance pressure over the period of time. So I like to work with young athletes, and I like to work for a longer period rather than a short period. I don't like short-term things, absolutely short-term tasks.
Perfect. Thank you. And I go to Vlad.
Thank you, Anna. It's a fascinating conversation. So, one thing I forgot to tell you is that Anna is the member of the executive committee of the Armenian Football Federation. So definitely she needs all of you, both audience and the speakers. So I'm sure that she takes, she gets great benefit as a result of this conversation. One thing, Grant, you reminded me of, that means, so I started, a long time ago as a journalist, and I was covering sports back in Romania, and I interviewed at some point one of the coaches that is actually now the coach of Dynamo Kiev in Ukraine. And the first week of the training, what he did with his new team is that he took them to the opera. And you could imagine, the impact, the effect that, how, people are questioning. And however, he saw value in this idea that a person who's competitive in sports, professional sports person, has to be well-rounded. And before going to the questions that were put in the chat, I would like to hear your thoughts about this idea that, playing sport is not enough. You have to develop as an individual. You have to be well-rounded. You have to get exposure to a variety of things in order to actually perform at your best, on the pitch, and in that case, in football. So, Grant, any thoughts about this?
Well, I'm going to answer from a different perspective, because I think when we talk about being well-rounded, and I see this a lot, it happened to me as an athlete, we get so caught up in the identity of being this particular athlete or our role. And so I think my responsibility as a mental performance coach is to teach athletes to understand your sport is what you do, it's not who you are. And to understand who you are separate from your sport, I believe that's one way to provide and expand this well-roundedness of that person. And so when you truly as a person understand who you are and what really motivates you, and what are the things that can really, really energize you and activate you as a person outside of sport, you can bring some of that energy, some of those things into your sport that's going to allow you to be more well-rounded. So I think right now and trust me, I see it's at least in the United States, there's a huge focus on specialization. And so there's a lot of athletes that are really, their identity's tied into their sport because they're doing it 365 days. So to getting these athletes to really understand their sport is what they do, it's not who they are. I think that's one way to get them to be a little more well-rounded.
Yeah, definitely. And the other speakers, you could actually, I want to go to the questions in the chat room, and then if you have any thoughts about what I said, please include them. Also, I would like to draw everybody's attention to the chat room. There are fascinating conversations going on there. Many new ideas, many angles that we might want to be included in future webinars. First, for example, Shlomo from Israel talk about the role of sociology in this whole thing, and the interaction between psychologists and sociologists, bringing the community into this discussion. So this is, again, an amazing idea that we'll include definitely in a future webinar. There was a question, actually, a couple of questions that I would like to so Tatiana was asking the balance between empowering players and maintaining team cohesion. So that's one, angle of the question. And I know that, some conversations started in the chat, but I would like to hear from all of you. Another question that actually was asked before by somebody who actually included it when he registered is basically, how do you work, and have two players or a number of players who don't like each other in real life interact well as teammates? So that's the whole idea of, how you build a team. How do you play this dynamic between individual and team? So that's kind of the larger topic. So let's start maybe with Dubrovka, and then we'll go to all the speakers.
Mm-hmm. Yes, really interesting dynamics of the teams are for me so fascinating, and like I spoke, it's changing every week. But one of the things that what can we also suggest to coaches if they don't have a opportunity to hire a sports psychologist is to observe their players, to observe the dynamic, to not be just involved as instructors, giving instructors, but also to observe and to listen, because sometimes they can, see so many things just observing their players during the practice or even during a game. When we have this dynamic situation, when we have cliques or so-called clans, it's interesting to see how they are functioning in a way of when they have a similar opponent. So basically to introduce them with their main goal as a team, as both of you or these two type of players have same goal, they have a same opponent. So what are the strengths of both of you to compete with this opponent? Or what are the strengths of the team? What are our values as a team to compete? What are our, similarities in group? We don't have to be the best friends. We don't have to be, to go to celebrate the birthdays of each other, but we have a common goal, and we have some common love, let's say. This is your sport, and the love for practice and improvement, which can be your guiding light to work together. And there are a lot of activities and workshops that are able to do in the on and off the court, in the team sessions, team meetings, that can provide teams to understand how beneficial is for them to cooperate, even if they are not good friends outside of the court. So in this way, I think, it's really important to openly communicate with them about this, and not to be afraid to speak about these issues, and also to address them in a way that there is a solution for any problem that can be visible or that can appear in the team.
Definitely. And as we do during these exchanges, we always emphasize this idea that sports is a metaphor for life. So everything that you said, for sport, is valid for almost everything that we do.
Yes.
When we work together, when we work in teams, and we are at the same time individuals. Yes. Lindsay, any thoughts about this?
Yes, I totally agree with what Dubrovka was saying. And I think that it's really important to address the conflict. I mean, it's really hard. So even if the athletes may be saying they can put it aside, conflict, as Grant's talked about, has an effect physiologically on us. Mm-hmm. And so then that can interfere with our sport performance in ways that it is a stressor, physiological challenges, injury challenges, other ways. So really trying to figure out ways to reduce that, even if it's not just interpersonally, but just within oneself, to take the level of conflict one's feeling, to decrease it with different ways. Grant's mentioned, David's talking about, just things that will help the athlete calm that down. So we've used a lot of practices in our work in conflict resolution. And as I mentioned, just really getting to know people as humans often, again, allows us to offer a little bit more grace. So then even if we're not going to birthday parties, at least then when we respect who they are, and we can perform better. And I definitely like the ideas of pulling in what our roles are in a team and how those fit together for peak performance.
Yeah, definitely. The Karambir, so also, the culture in general of society plays a role in this dynamic between players and the group. So how does it work in your case in India? Do we have Karambir? We lost Karambir. We don't know. Okay, so let's maybe
You are muted. Unmute you.
he's muted.
Yes.
Mhm.
Sorry.
The
Sorry.
connection.
Unmute myself. Well,
Yeah.
actually, yes. Culturally, what I felt actually working since last 7 years in sports psychology, the cultural differences do play a very significant role. I was talking the same thing. I don't know about the USA, UK, other countries. These are big countries I'm taking name of. How they are working. They are working very professionally, and I was fortunate to work with a few of the coaches from Europe or America also. Yes, within India, actually, I want to tell you, we have internally culturally very diverse. You travel from one point to another point within the country, like there are different states, they have different language, different food to eat, they have different the attire. Actually, traditionally they wear different attires. So it is like internal challenge for me. I'm from this state called Punjab, so I'm a Punjabi. So Punjabi is a particular language within India. So I'm interacting with an athlete from Northeast do have a different though we speak common language Hindi, but it becomes very difficult to interact with an athlete who have is culturally different. To make in psychology, communication is very important. If you cannot speak the same language which can your the part sorry the athlete can understand, then becomes very difficult to convey the message. So cultural differences do play very significant role, in my opinion.
Definitely. Any thoughts about this, David? I know that, obviously Britain, football is a big passion for everybody. How do you deal, in the context of passion with this relationship between individual players and the team, the group?
It's an interesting one. Like you say, football is a big sport in our country. I think we have to think about the coach's relationship and the coach's personality in this as well. So if you've got for argument's sake, like a more task-orientated coach, as opposed to being more socially minded, that particular type of coach could well be more interested in the numbers, in performance, in the outcome. So part of our role is to try and educate them to understand how when difficult conversations arise, whether they're actually the best person to have those difficult conversations, or whether they should delegate that on to other coaches who have got better sort of softer skills, if you like. I know certainly there's some highly regarded coaches in the UK who do that for those reasons, because they recognize their own limitations, if you like. And just going back to an earlier point as well, where I think someone mentioned about having human conversations as coaches. Mm-hmm. That is such a huge thing for an individual athlete, just to feel valued, and it has a huge bearing on their performance. But let's be honest, it is actually very difficult for a coach. At the same time, if you've got a squad of 15, 20, 30 players, it's quite difficult to actually get to know what's going on a day-to-day basis in someone's life. If they've got relationship problems, if they've got other things going on, and all of these factors do have a massive impact on training and performance on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Yeah, I cannot imagine the level of complexity of actually dealing with so many individuals, strong personalities, in the context of passion and having all these pressures, from inside and from the outside. It's really a fascinating universe. So I would like to, so next question will start with Grant, but in the meantime, Laurel Schwab asked an interesting question, and usually we try to connect with one of the persons in the audience and to get to know them and to ask the questions. So Laurel, if you have mic and video, if you could ask your question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask this in person. My work is in impact evaluation and measurement. So I help sport and sport for development organizations track their outcomes and reveal the success that they're causing. And obviously this would be a space where it might be a little bit more intangible or qualitative. So I pose the question, and David responded to this a little bit, but I'd love to hear from the rest. How would you measure the outcomes that you're creating for your athletes?
Definitely. So let's start with Grant this time.
So it's really interesting. Like when you think about sports, we're so outcome focused. We evaluate our athletes, our coaches, overall programs on outcomes. And I know that there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of parents, there's a lot of coaches, athletic directors. When they're putting money towards your services, they want to know, what kind of outcome can I get? And to be honest with you, for me, when I'm working with athletes, when I'm working with coaches, it's going back to control the controllables, right? We can't control the outcome. We can't control the result. If we could, we would all be perfect, right? So what I do is I put a system in place and a model in place for an athlete and a coach to actually focus and evaluate on how present that athlete was. So more often than not, I get these athletes that come up to me and like, I went 0 for 4 in a baseball game. And I'm like, well, what was the quality of the bat? How present were you? Did you work your routines? How was your breath? Focus on those things, because those are things you can control. And if you're focusing on those controllables, more often than not, you'll get the results. So there's other ways of providing, evaluations on results, but the main thing is evaluate how present you are. Let's start there first.
Okay, Dubrovka, any thoughts about ways to measure? Actually, this one was one of the most asked questions in the before when they registered. So everybody's interested. How do you evaluate your work?
Well, we cannot compare ourselves to, for example, fitness trainers or physical preparation coaches, because they can measure everything. Unfortunately, our things are not so valuable, not so measurable, so sometimes it's tricky. But like Grant said, we always try to put emphasis to players and coaches to see the improvement in their performance, to evaluate their improvement in way how they were, what they able to do now. They are not able to do it 2 months ago, or to think about what lead to this improvement, the effort they put, the new knowledge they have, new techniques they learned from us. So something that to teach them that also learning some new things and improving step by step is the outcome that eventually will also lead to the result, sometimes even to win the game. So I think it's really important for them to emphasize the importance of being better than they were yesterday, and being better than they were 2 months or 3 months ago, for them to see how they improve and why they improve. It's not just because they wish to improve, but what they did to improve in such stage.
Sure. Karambir, so briefly, shortly, to go to other questions after. Karambir, is your mic muted?
Sorry. So in terms of measurement, I prefer to interview using the various structured, semi-structured interview, questionnaires. Then there is this observation. Being a psychologist, everyone have to be a very good observer of the behavior. So I go to the ground, I observe, and then the last but not the least, the questionnaire. So there are various questionnaire. You can use a different questionnaire to measure different psychological attributes and factors. And then there is another method which is a bit of technology based. Biofeedback systems are there, where you can measure the heart rate, and where you can measure the skin conductance, where you can measure the brain waves also. Now the neurofeedback is there. So psychophysiological, it depends upon kind of technology you have. So we are procuring that technology. Hopefully I will have my neurofeedback soon, and HRV trainer also. because I told now the performance pressure is very important. Everyone talk about performance pressure. So how to deal with the performance pressure? So there, I have to teach the athlete various relaxation skills, regulation skills, how to regulate the arousal. That can be achieved with the relaxation techniques also, and with the assistive technology. So this is my answer for this question. Thank you.
Great. Lindsay?
Sure. I think, I might come at it from a different perspective because our role is often working in the coach education component. So different than some of the other individuals who might be working as sports psychologists or mental performance consultants with specific teams and wanting to see growth there. So some of the things that we've done with coach education is really, first of all, we have to see a change in knowledge and understanding first before we can see the behavior change. But then in measuring some behaviors, I think sometimes we can get coaches to tell examples of stories that they've seen and changes of themselves or youth. We've also used surveys about closeness. We have a great one that we've used in Liberia for children who couldn't read and using some physical images to show about their closeness and changing with different components of the program, because we are looking to increase that relationship building. There's also some measures about environment and perceptions of the environment that youth can complete that will also help when we're looking at those measures too. So we've definitely used ways of doing interviews with coaches. We've also used kind of photojournalism from the youth perspective to take pictures of things that they've seen changed in their world. And then certainly the surveys as well. So a variety of perspectives, but again, a little bit different depending on what you're looking to measure.
Great. So since David responded in chat, so let's move to the next question, and then maybe we'll start with David. Anna, any questions from the chat room or
the chat room, I see lots of conversation. I don't see particularly questions, but there is interesting from Shlomo Weinish asking takes from the psychological point of view on that documentary Final Dance. You saw that documentary, because I think that this is the best of 2020 gave us. So I think that if anybody of our speakers saw it, can you give a small characteristic about the Final Dance from the psychological point of view? Who saw the documentary about Michael Jordan?
About Michael Jordan, the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
So Dubrovka, you played basketball. Maybe you saw the
I grew up watching Michael Jordan, so for me it was like, yeah. So we had the discussion about what's behind what is the how will I say this, how to present to young players what documentary wanted to say. It was sometimes difficult because what we heard in the documentary is that Michael Jordan was in some ways putting pressure on his teammates, and being a great teammate and being a great player doesn't necessarily need to that you need to put pressure on your teammates. It's important to see how can you be a good leader. So late Kobe Bryant also shared a story about comparison, how being a good leader, you can also be in different ways. So it depends on what are your teammates and what is the philosophy of your coach. So basically, it's nice documentary. It's really, good documentary, but I think we should put emphasis on for the players in a way to teach them that leadership, it's not always putting pressure on your teammates, and it's leadership, it's also can be presented in many different ways, in collaboration, communication, different things.
Perfect. Any other thoughts? So no, okay. Then there is another question here I have. How to influence the administration that the psychologists are very important for the team sports? How you do that? From where we should start?
like the Armenian Football Federation? How do you influence the people making decisions and having the money that mental, training is important?
But the most important is not even the administrators, are the coaches, the head coaches. That is like, they don't want to listen about this. So how you break them? So let's start with Lindsay.
I think David had something to share, so maybe we can defer to him.
Yeah, sure, David.
All right. Thank you, Lindsay. Hope I haven't stolen your thunder there. Yes, I've got an example actually where I was doing some work in the Football Association here in the UK, and I recognised quite early it was a 12-month program. I recognised early that the best thing I could do was actually do some coach education work before I then went to working with the players. So we did some group seminars, group workshops, and then also I did some like one-to-one work with the coaches, and it was quite fascinating actually after having doing the one-to-one work with them, because I would say 90% of the coaches had said to me afterwards that they were expecting the hour or so I was spending with them to be a bit of a waste of time for them. There was some skepticism, but I actually turned it around in that hour, whereby we did a personality profile with them and how their behaviors went on to then influence their athletes. And then we got talking about the personality types of the athletes, and it grew from there. And I got their instant trust by doing that really, really early on. Yeah, that's all from me on that one.
All right, Lindsay.
Sure, I think it's a great question. I don't have a miracle answer. I wish that I did. I think David's point of getting to the coaches in a private way to help them process things is helpful. I have not had a lot of success like in a big group coach class. So getting into individually, I think I've also done two things that have helped sometimes is ask the coaches what they wish they would have known as athletes related to the psychology. And sometimes then they'll give us little insights and think, okay, do you think other players on your team might want that? And sometimes they'll be like, oh yes. And so sometimes we've gone about it that way. And then the other way that I've actually found most helpful is actually to be able to offer services to individuals on a team. And then when they see changes in the individual athletes, then they're willing to talk with me a little bit more or bring us in for a team session. So sometimes working from the kind of the ground up with the individual athletes themselves up. And then when they start requesting it and start to see changes, then coaches are buying in a little bit from that perspective too.
Perfect. Here in UEFA diploma classes, they have a small course of psychology, and the coaches think that they know everything now, and they don't need any the professionals are there. So that's the problem when you talk to them, convince them that you need it because you cannot do by yourself. No, they are like, we did a course, we know that. So that's the most challenging in Armenia to deal with it. So let's hear from Karambir how it is in India.
So we have a same situation, Anna, actually. I don't want to take the name of the coach actually, but one day I was talking to the coach, and very experienced coach, by the way, with a huge regard. And he said, I don't know, maybe he misunderstood me in some way, what I was trying to tell him. And then he said, I have done the sports psychology, I'm a sports psychologist. So I said, it is okay. So I'm very tolerant actually. You need to be tolerant when you're a sports psychologist, especially in India. I hear a lot of things from here and there. So especially the answer to the question, this is not a very satisfactory answer to the question which Mr. Vlad just asked, how to influence. I think, I don't know who asked this question. You have to have a good reputation. And there are many ways you can build your reputation. Then only you would be able to create your support system. And last, you will definitely integrate into the system. So this is what I know. So rapport means like I have a good qualification, I have a good experience. if I consider India's scenario, I have a good communication skills as well. I'm not as good as Lindsay or maybe Mr. David or Mr. Grant, but yes, in terms of the Indian culture, I can speak good English, or I can interact with the authorities. So I go to I visit my senior administrators. I talk to them. I tell them few things how important it is, and gradually building a friendship and building a good reputation with certain achievements. Sending them sometime a text also may help. So interaction and communication is very important. When you stop interacting and communicating, I don't think you would be able to influence anyone. And influencing is not important. The important part is making them realize that it is important, and it is important. Psychology is important. Just imagine the world without mind, and then I don't know what you will see other than this. So it is important. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Grant.
You know, I've had the opportunity to influence and talk to all different kinds of decision makers, whether it's a coach, the athletic director, executive directors, assistant coaches. And I think it depends on the need of the program or the coach. So I've kind of learned how to tailor my approach. But really, when it comes down to it, when you're really trying to sell the idea of mental performance training or using a sports psychologist, how important is your culture? And that's one of the questions that I ask: is how important is it? What does your culture look like? What does it consist of? And when I can learn a little bit more about that, then I can start interjecting of what would it be like if your head coach was more present, when they can actually control their emotions and their thoughts in a more manner, not only for their team, but they can make better decisions and they don't have to get overridden by emotion or with referee calls or parents yelling at them. And same thing with athletes. What would it look like if an athlete was more present? They dealt with adversity a lot better. They were actually switching, they are reframing things in the moment and not letting things that they're out of the control affect them. What would that look like? So it's asking them questions and building this picture that they can then go, wow, like you can do that. You can affect the whole program top down and making them more present. Absolutely. So that's just one way of like really interjecting this work to affect the whole culture, not just the coach, not just the teammate or team, but everybody that's involved.
Perfect. Thank you. And last, Dubrovka.
Well, I can just say that I mostly agree with what all the colleagues said. And the really good point made Lindsay when she said to ask coaches what would they like to hear when they were players. This is something. And when I work with coaches, what I have this, I don't know, am I lucky or what? Most of the coaches that I worked with, they used sports psychologists when they were young. So this is something that is always nice because they know and they have experience about how sports psychology is important. And the more educated are coaches, also they more accept the how will I say, more member as a team, so they also appreciate working with the physical trainer, with the psychologist, with nutritionists. So the more they are educated, the less they are afraid about someone will influence their knowledge.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I'll go to Vlad now.
Thank you. Amazing conversation. We'll continue it definitely. We are out of time, but we'll continue it in future webinars next year. Now I would like to invite to say a few words. Ryan Murphy, representing the Sports Diplomacy Division of the State Department. As you know, and some of you were part of the program, I know that Lindsay was, this in-person exchanges done by the Sports Diplomacy Division. And as I told you initially, we are asked more often in these days to actually add an expert with your type of expertise. So I'm wondering what Ryan thinks about this and in general about what he heard So Ryan, if you have mic and video, please, if you could say a few words.
Yeah, hi everyone. So thank you very much. Obviously, it's such an important topic. And as Vlad said, we do get more and more requests for individuals with this skill to be a part of these in-person people-to-people exchanges, which is great. I do think in hearing some of the conversations about coaches and getting administrators and others involved or on board with this, it has been sort of a generational push. We see a lot more youth nowadays that have access to these resources, which is great. So it's really getting kind of the older generations on board with the methodology and with all of the skills that sports psychology can give to these youth and to these players and coaches and whoever else. So it's such an important topic. So thank you all for being a part of this. I was chatting with Lindsay earlier. It was great to see her. Obviously, we've worked with her on a handful of programs in the past underneath the International Sports Programming Initiative. So it was great, but it's really nice to kind of virtually meet all of you, all the other panelists. It's been an amazing lineup from all over the globe, and it just shows what these types of programs do and the type of knowledge that you all can share with others from around the globe. It's been as always, these are great webinars, and it really just goes to show the great work that World Learning and Vlad and Anna and others really do in putting together these types of programs. So thank you all for all of your help. As always, thank you again from the U.S. Department of State and the Sports Diplomacy Division.
Thank you, Ryan. Our webinar will end here. We'll restart the webinars at some point in January with a topic actually that has something to do with what some of you spoke here. We are going to talk about women football and the way that we break, prejudices and certain mentalities, in relation to that in mostly the developing world, but not only. So that one is going to have a kind of a strong component of psychology and sociology involved. So I hope that you'll all join us. Now I would like to thank very much our speakers, David, Dubrovka, Karambir, Lindsay, and Grant, our team, Anna, Laurel, Nicole, and Aaron for an amazing work throughout these webinars that we've started in March, a little bit after the pandemic killed all of us. And while we hope that life will return to normal and we'll meet in person and we could collaborate in exchanges, for the time being, these webinars will continue to link the world in meaningful ways. So again, thank you all. Please keep in touch, stay safe. Whoever wants something that was posted in the chat room, we have access. You could download it, so we could provide those resources. Please stay connected with the speakers, and this is going to help all of us, those involved in professional sports, in amateur sports, in youth development through sports, to actually make tremendous progress. So thank you again for being with us. See you soon, probably in 2021. Hopefully, a better year for all of us.
Thank you very much.